Dr. Hale, you're under arrest for wire fraud, aggravated assault by deception, and felony theft exceeding $2.3 million.
Hospital corridor. Early morning. The kind of quiet that only exists before the day shift arrives. Fluorescent lights humming, the distant beep of a monitor somewhere down the hall. Two detectives are waiting near the OR exit doors. They've been there for 11 minutes. The doors swing open. Dr. Marcus Hale steps out in scrubs, still snapping off a surgical glove. He looks tired but satisfied, the way a surgeon looks after a long procedure that went well. He doesn't see them until it's too late to change his expression.
You have the wrong person. I just finished a 6-hour surgery. Do you understand what I do here?
One of the detectives steps forward. We do, sir. That's why we're here. That man had just implanted his 47th patient with a fake hip joint. Not a flawed one. Not a recalled one. A counterfeit, sourced from an overseas factory for $80, then billed to insurance at $12,000. He wasn't in that operating room to heal people. He was running a production line. And the hospital that trusted him, the staff that worked beside him, the patients who signed consent forms believing they were getting the best, none of them had any idea. What you're about to watch is how one of medicine's most respected professionals turned the operating room into his own personal warehouse. This is the full story. Let's get into it. Here's something worth thinking about before we go any further. If your surgeon told you that you needed a $15,000 implant, would you ever stop to ask where it actually came from? Most people wouldn't. Most people can't. You're lying on a table, trusting that the person standing over you is doing right by you. That trust is supposed to be the whole foundation of medicine. It was also exactly what Dr. Marcus Hale was counting on. Drop in the comments. At what point do you think the hospital should have caught this? And if you're new here, subscribe and hit the bell. On this channel, nobody gets away clean. Marcus Hale grew up in Columbus, Ohio. Not wealthy, not poor. Somewhere in the middle, in a house where money was managed carefully and ambition was treated like a survival skill. His father worked as a machinist, spending long shifts shaping metal parts with the kind of precision that most people never think about. His mother worked in hospital administration, managing schedules, budgets, and the quiet logistics that keep a medical facility running. Between the two of them, Marcus grew up understanding two things very well: how systems work and how much it costs when they fail you. He was a sharp student from the beginning, the kind who didn't just get good grades but seemed to understand things faster than the people teaching him. He earned a full scholarship to Case Western Reserve University and moved through medical school at a pace that got people's attention. No repeated courses, no stumbles, just a clean, straight line moving forward. He chose orthopedic surgery, the specialty that deals with bones, joints, and implants. The specialty his father's factory had once supplied parts for. He completed his residency at Johns Hopkins, one of the most competitive programs in the country, and finished in the top 5% of his cohort. His supervisors described him as technically gifted, calm under pressure, and extremely fast in the OR without sacrificing accuracy. That combination of speed and precision made him valuable. Not just clinically valuable, commercially valuable. Mercer-Whitfield Medical Center, a large private hospital with a reputation built largely on high-volume joint replacement surgeries, came after him hard. They offered him a salary, a full surgical team, and a caseload that would have taken most surgeons a decade to build on their own. Internal emails later surfaced in court described his recruitment as a significant institutional win. He accepted, he moved his family, he put on the badge and walked into his assigned operating room for the first time, and by every account looked completely at home. Nobody on the hiring committee thought to look too closely at what was behind that comfort. Why would they? His record was perfect. His credentials were real. His reputation was spotless. The same institution that gave him a badge, a salary, and a theater of his own had just handed him the keys to something he'd been quietly thinking about since the day he watched his father get laid off from the factory that made surgical tools. To understand what Marcus Hale did, you first need to understand how the system around him actually worked. Because this wasn't a case where someone broke through a wall. This was a case where someone found a door that nobody had ever thought to lock. At Mercer-Whitfield, medical implants were ordered through a structured procurement process. The hospital maintained an approved vendor list, a set of pre-vetted manufacturers whose products had been cleared for use. When a surgery was scheduled, the OR supply team would pull the required implants based on a requisition form tied to that specific procedure. Everything was logged. Everything had a paper trail. On the surface, it looked thorough, but there was a feature built into the system that introduced a significant amount of flexibility, and with it, a significant amount of trust. It was called the surgeon preference card. Each surgeon on staff could specify, by procedure type, exactly which implants they preferred to use. Brand, model, size ranges, all of it was recorded and honored. The supply team's job was to have those items ready. The surgeon's job was to use them correctly. Nobody's job was to verify that those two things actually matched once the OR doors closed. That gap was the whole story. Insurance billing at Mercer-Whitfield was triggered by the surgeon's operative report, the document the surgeon filled out after a procedure describing what was done and what was used. That report was taken at face value. There was no secondary step where someone physically checked the implant's serial number against the billing code. The supply team trusted that the surgeon used what was on the tray. The billing department trusted what was in the operative report. The insurance company trusted the bill that came from billing. It was a chain, and every link in that chain was connected by the same assumption. Nobody checked the link before it. No cross audits, no spot checks on implant serial numbers post-surgery. No mechanism to compare what was requisitioned against what was physically recovered or confirmed in the OR. The controls that existed were all pointed outward, toward outside fraud, toward patient billing errors, toward vendor overcharging, not toward the surgeon. Everyone assumed a board-certified surgeon had no reason to lie about what he put inside a patient. That single assumption was the foundation the entire system rested on. And Marcus Hale had understood that long before anyone else thought to question it. Marcus Hale didn't stumble into this. He engineered it. And the starting point wasn't greed, it was knowledge. Growing up watching his father work, Hale had developed an early understanding of manufacturing tolerances. That's the term machinists use for how close a part needs to be to its exact measurements before it's considered acceptable. His father had spent years working within those margins, shaving metal, measuring gaps, knowing the difference between a part that was perfect and a part that would simply pass inspection. That knowledge had transferred quietly to his son, and his son, decades later, knew exactly how to use it. He began researching overseas manufacturers. He was looking for something specific, orthopedic components that weren't just similar to the approved implants he regularly used, but close enough in appearance and dimension to pass a visual check in a busy OR. He found a factory in China producing hip and knee components that mimicked two of his most frequently used implant models almost exactly. The finish looked right. The sizing matched. To anyone who wasn't running a laboratory comparison, they were indistinguishable. He set up a shell company, Ortho Precision Holdings LLC, registered in Nevada with nothing but a rented mailbox as its address. That company became the purchasing vehicle. The counterfeit implants were ordered through it, shipped discreetly, and stored away from the hospital entirely. In the first year, he kept the substitution rate deliberately low. Roughly 1 in every 12 procedures involved a counterfeit implant. That ratio was carefully chosen, low enough that no single quarterly review of his case outcomes would produce a visible pattern. He kept the original packaging from legitimate implant orders and reused it in the OR to maintain the appearance of full compliance. To the scrub team standing beside him, everything looked normal. By year 2, the ratio had climbed to 1 in 5. The insurance spread, the difference between the $80 he paid per unit and the $12,000 billed to insurance, was being funneled back through Ortho Precision Holdings as fictitious consulting fees. By week 6 of the scheme, his average take per substituted surgery was $11,920. By month 18, his cumulative profit had crossed $900,000. The money went to a second home in Scottsdale, private school fees for his 2 children, and a vintage watch collection that investigators would later value at $340,000. Every purchase made quietly, spread out, and easy to explain away. One careful decision at a time. Here's what I want you to sit with for a second. This wasn't a desperate man. This was a surgeon at the top of his field who knew exactly how to exploit the one gap nobody thought to check, because the system was designed to trust him. How many institutions are running on that same assumption right now? Subscribe, hit the bell. The next case might be closer to home than you think. The thing about a scheme built on patience is that it can be undone by a single moment of bad luck. For Marcus Hale, that moment came from a patient he had never met, in a hospital he had never worked in, during a surgery he had nothing to do with. A woman in her early 60s had received a hip replacement 14 months earlier. The joint had failed, not gradually, the way worn implants sometimes do over many years, but suddenly and completely. She was taken into revision surgery at a different hospital across the state. When the retrieving surgeon removed the failed implant and examined it, something felt off. He logged the serial number and contacted the manufacturer to file a standard device report. The manufacturer had no record of that serial number. It had never been produced by them. The surgeon filed a report with the FDA's medical device reporting system. The FDA flagged the serial number as unregistered. That flag moved the case out of the realm of a clinical complication and into something else entirely. Within weeks, the FBI's healthcare fraud unit had quietly opened an investigation. Mercer-Whitfield's primary insurer was brought in as a cooperating partner. The covert phase was methodical. Forensic accountants began the slow work of pulling Hale's OR logs and cross-referencing every implant serial number against verified manufacturer records. It was a 14-week process, conducted entirely without Hale's knowledge. By the end of it, investigators had identified dozens of unregistered serial numbers across his surgical history, each one representing a patient, a counterfeit component, and a fraudulent insurance claim. But identifying the pattern wasn't enough. They needed to capture the act. A bait surgery was arranged. Investigators coordinated with hospital administration to schedule Hale for an elective procedure involving a cooperating patient. Before the surgery, the OR supply team, without Hale's knowledge, was quietly replaced by investigators, and the implants placed on the surgical tray were GPS-tagged, genuine components, each one logged and traceable. Hidden cameras had been installed in the OR. Hale never touched the tray. He didn't need to. His OR technician, a man who had worked beside him for over 2 years and who was later identified as a knowing co-conspirator, reached across the tray before the procedure began, removed the tagged implant, and replaced it with a counterfeit pulled from his own supply. The hidden camera footage captured the entire swap. It took 23 seconds. It was 6:42 in the morning when Marcus Hale walked out of the operating room for the last time as a free man. He was still holding his surgical cap, folded once in his left hand, the way surgeons do when they're winding down after a long procedure. His OR badge was clipped to his chest. He looked tired in the ordinary way, the kind of tired that comes after hours of focused physical work, not the kind that comes from guilt. He had no reason to think this morning was different from any other. 2 FBI agents were waiting in the corridor. A hospital security officer stood slightly behind them and to the left. 30 feet away, near the wall, a senior hospital administrator stood watching. She did not move toward him. She did not say anything. One of the agents stepped forward. "Dr. Hale, FBI, you're under arrest for wire fraud, healthcare fraud, and aggravated assault by deception, 47 counts." Hale stopped walking. His eyes moved from one agent to the other. When he spoke, his voice was measured, the way a man sounds when he is trying very hard to appear calm. 47? That number is... He stopped himself, straightened slightly. "You need to speak to the hospital's legal team. I'm a physician. We've already spoken to them, sir." There was a pause, not long, maybe 3 seconds. But the kind of pause where you can see a person's understanding of their situation beginning to shift. He was cuffed with his hands in front, a discretionary protocol the arresting agent applied given his professional background. There was no struggle, no raised voice. He allowed it the way someone allows something they have already decided not to fight. Then he turned his head and looked back at the OR doors he had just come through. Just once. Then he looked down at the floor. He was walked toward the elevator. Just before he said he was invoking his right to counsel and stopped speaking entirely, he asked one question. "Are my patients going to be all right?" The hospital administrator who witnessed the arrest was interviewed several weeks later as part of the civil proceedings. She was asked about that moment. She thought about it for a while before answering. That question made it worse somehow, not better. Marcus Hale was charged with 47 counts of healthcare fraud, 3 counts of wire fraud, and 2 counts of aggravated assault by deception. Those last 2 counts were specific to patients who had suffered direct physical harm, people whose counterfeit implants had failed inside their bodies, requiring additional surgeries, extended recovery, and in some cases, permanent damage to their mobility. His defense team moved to suppress the OR surveillance footage, arguing it had been obtained improperly. That motion was denied. They moved to exclude the bait surgery evidence entirely. That motion was denied as well. With the footage intact and the paper trail from Ortho Precision Holdings fully reconstructed, the case against him was, by most legal assessments, airtight. He accepted a plea agreement, 14 years in federal prison, $4.1 million in restitution, and the permanent revocation of his medical license, meaning that regardless of when he was released, he would never operate again. At sentencing, the judge looked at him directly before delivering the terms and said this: "You did not make a mistake in a moment of weakness. You made a calculation 47 times about whose body mattered less than your margin." The OR technician who had performed the physical swaps pleaded guilty separately as a cooperating witness. He received 4 years. Ortho Precision Holdings LLC was formally dissolved, and all associated assets, including the Scottsdale property, the private school accounts, and the watch collection, were seized as part of the restitution order. One detail from the proceedings received particular attention. A scrub nurse who had worked in Hale's OR had raised informal concerns 8 months before the investigation began. She had noticed inconsistencies in the implant packaging and mentioned it to a supervisor. She was quietly reassigned to a different unit shortly afterward and never formally followed up with. During the sentencing proceedings, she was publicly named, formally cleared of any connection to the scheme, and acknowledged by the court as someone who had tried to do the right thing before anyone was ready to listen. Mercer-Whitfield overhauled its entire implant verification process. Real-time barcode scanning and third-party serial number confirmation became mandatory OR protocol at the hospital. The FDA issued updated national guidance on intraoperative device authentication, changes that have since been adopted across hundreds of facilities. 47 surgeries. 47 people who went under anesthesia trusting that what went into their body was what it was supposed to be. The system didn't fail because it was broken. It failed because it was designed to trust the person who was breaking it. If this case made you think twice, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more cases like this one. I'll see you in the next one.